Probably not the show everybody wants to see right before week one, but explosive big report coming out from our guy Tyler Dunne at Go Long. He joins us now on an emergency edition of the CHGO Bears Podcast. Welcome into an emergency edition of the CHGO Bears Podcast, late on a Friday, going into the weekend of week one. Adam Hoge and Mark Carman with you, and we believe Adam Jahns will be joining us shortly, too, for this. As we bring in Tyler Dunne, who is just released a big report and dealing with a power outage at the exact same time. So if he looks a little blurry and everything, we're just happy he's on with us because his internet's basically out at the same time. But Tyler, thanks for jumping on with us in short notice. And there he goes. I had a bad feeling that might happen.
Man, that's a bummer. We'll get him back.
It's okay. Yeah, that gives me some time here to set this up, and hopefully we can get a better connection here with Ty. So Tyler Dunne he's golongtd.com. He's been running this really good long form website since 2020. Used to cover the Bills, used to cover the Packers, been in the NFL reporter for a long, long time. House of Dysfunction, it's called. Part 1, The Curious Case of Caleb Williams. It goes on and on and on. Part 2, Part 3, which I don't even think I've gotten to at this point. And there is a lot in here to discuss as we try to reestablish with Ty. Ty, you got us okay now?
I get. My headphones went out, and then we'll try. Hopefully, can you hear me okay?
Not really.
No, but we had a glimpse of you, and because this news is so explosive, we are going to battle through this, Ty. The internet is going to work for us. It wants to help us. I know everybody needs to hear this discussion today. So hopefully it'll just settle in here, or maybe the power will come back on.
I know, it's great. I can barely hear you. The headphones aren't working. The internet's out, but where there's a will, we'll figure out some audibles here.
Yeah, well, let's start here. I guess just where do you want to start with, why you went about this piece, where it came from, and all. It looks like we just lost him again.
So this is a great effort by us. There was breaking news. We want to give it to you. Tyler's got a lot of unnamed sources in the piece detailing how the Bears went about their business in drafting Caleb Williams. And, and we'll try to reestablish with Tyler here. But to me, this is not really, this story has very little to do with Caleb, if at all, actually. There's a bunch of details in here that are obviously interesting pertaining to the quarterback, but this is more so about the Bears process. This is underlining that, the biggest, biggest news in here that's really not necessarily, surprising news is that the Bears were absolutely, Ryan Poles keyed in on Caleb Williams and didn't really consider anything else. And that scouts were really not free to give other opinions because the general manager loved Caleb to that level. Which is not necessarily all that surprising, but to see it in on the internet, written with a bunch of stuff around it and scouts being quoted, it's just not a great look for the Bears. It's not a great look for Ryan. I think we might have Tyler back here, Adam, as I see his face, but it's frozen.
I think, Tyler, if you can see us, why don't you just text us and we'll try to figure out when your power's back and the internet's working to get you on. I think in the meantime, we'll just keep reacting as we see fit here. But I'll say a couple things about this. that I agree with you. There's two parts to this. Okay, there's what Caleb's got going on, his responsibility, what happened last season. That's really what part one is about. And there's a lot in there. I mean, there's from the idea that by the time they were voting for captains, it was essentially people were laughing at the idea that he would have been named a captain. And I'm trying to, but basically the story said, that's why I'm on the wrong part. Multiple coaches admit to go long that the team cooked the voting process to ensure a C was stitched on his chest. And so there's questions about Caleb's work ethic. There's questions about what he was doing out of the building. If you actually listen to some of the quotes, though, what I found more surprising about that, Carm, was some of the things that were brought up about him skipping meetings, some of which were technically voluntary. You know, a protection meeting in the morning, first thing that was in this piece. But you know, even at the high school level, you have voluntary things that you should be there, especially if you're the starting quarterback. So I get that part of it. But they've spoken openly this year too about, like, you know, what it takes to be a quarterback in this league. And so I think if you read between the lines on some of that, you can sort of see where this is coming from. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that stuff other than the other side of it. And this comes up in part one of this report, where they're talking about what we talked about a lot last season too. The moment Matt Eberflus was fired, the disaster in Detroit at the end of this game, you have a lot of coaches putting the blame on Caleb for not executing the play that was called, which we were supposed to run a quarterback draw and immediately call timeout, get the yardage, call timeout, get the field goal set up. And all of that is fair. But I'm going to say the same thing I said in that post-game show and all week long after that. You still could have called it yourself. And like, I get it that it's more than one person's fault, but that part of this too, I think there's a lot of coaches that are sort of doing the same thing they're accusing him of, which is putting all the blame on him instead. The idea that Matt Eberflus should have been fired after everything that happened last year, despite knowing all of this stuff now with the quarterback, I mean, that's laughable too. So my point overall in this, even reading this, is there's a middle ground, and there's a lot of worrisome stuff for the quarterback. There's a lot of worrisome stuff with the general manager, which we need to get into. But I think the big question that out of all of this is it salvageable with Ben Johnson? Can Ben Johnson fix all this?
Well, okay. So if you want to go down that road, look, Ben Johnson was the number one coaching candidate in the NFL last year. Ben Johnson has a lot of contacts around the league. Ben Johnson chose to come here to work hand in hand with the general manager, Ryan Poles, and the quarterback, Caleb Williams. So obviously, for somebody who sure loves Chicago and being in the division and all these things, he's not coming here if he doesn't feel like he's going to have a great chance to win football games and do what he, you know, and have a lot of fun being a head coach in the NFL, period. Now, so there's an optimistic point. The other side of this, and you know, I'm more just sort of dialed in on part two of the piece, and the fact that, because the one thing that was written about was that that Ryan was never actually a scout. He was already Scott Pioli put him elevated him initially, and so he was always like up the food chain. So he wasn't actually in the dirt just evaluating guys from scratch. How much does that play into some of the misses that they've had? And then the other underlying is that Poles is a traits guy. And if you look at guys that he's drafted that are traits, Karan Amagaji, traits, but Caleb fell in love with the traits. Now, and again, all these could in theory work out, but we're looking at the process of the GM, and also what's being put in there is that, you know, guys were afraid to speak up. They were afraid to go against him because they're worried about keeping their own jobs. That's not a good culture. That is not. But if you were winding back to what you're talking about, as far as like, if you want to flip this on the positive side, Ben Johnson hired an entire coaching staff that were not going to be yes men to him, that were not his friends that he's talked about, because he wants the actual discussion going on. So is the organization moving in the right way? I hopefully it is. But when you're looking back at this process, not interviewing and talking with Jayden because they were so down the Caleb thing, it's just not a good look. It's pretty clear that their mind was made up, and that doesn't mean that Caleb can't be successful, but it's not great process.
No, I mean, look, the process and all this is concerning. There's look, if you haven't read this, it's extremely long. There's no way in a podcast we can recap everything.
We could just do a podcast of reading it to you. That might be good.
Well, that would be, it's basically a book, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
And Tyler Dunne is apparently driving somewhere where he can find internet to join us. So he shout out to him, because he's doing the best he can. As apparently a tree knocked out his power. But some of the details in here is, picture them in the scouting room to go over the quarterbacks, right? The draft room, and they're putting up film of Drake May, and to shorten up what's being written here in much greater detail, like, it was biased. It was, putting up there all the Drake May's bad stuff to be like, oh, he's not good. And then, here's one spot. Chris White, the team's assistant director of pro scouting that spring, called out polls. We're dragging this kid through the mud, he said. North Carolina's receiving core was hurting that final 23 season, on and on and on. And they just, there's literally, according to the report, there's laughter at some of these plays. And then they get to Jayden Daniels, and it's a lot of the same stuff, with one scout saying Jayden Daniels was clearly a better quarterback. If he didn't want to go with Drake May, Jayden Daniels was clearly a better quarterback to anyone with an eye. Yeah,
that ain't great. And then there's another one. It says one scout, there's a reason why, this is about on Caleb, there's a reason why he has processing issues. There's a reason why he held onto the ball longer than any quarterback in college coming out, and it was never discussed. None of these things were discussed. There was nothing negative. We took him because the media said to take him. And I have a hard time on some level believing that really was the driving force, that he was worried about the national media, the Chicago media, or whoever coming at him. But that is the hardest part about being a GM and making the decisions. Sometimes it's not going to be popular. Sometimes it's not going to be on board. It's true that it was the easiest thing to do. Caleb was the consensus number one, and he was going to get the least amount of flack. But if it doesn't work out, you're going to get all the flack. So, and articles like this are going to be written. So ultimately, you want to draft the right guy. Listen, at some point, Ryan Poles is going to be on a podcast or a radio show or TV somewhere, and he's going to be asked about his process in this draft and whether he regrets any part of it. And if I was a media advisor to him, I would tell him to be honest, because sometimes you just don't see yourself that clearly. And this article makes it seem like Poles is just not seeing himself clear. It's not like he wanted to get it wrong. He just got tunnel vision. I'm not even saying he got it wrong, but there's got to be some there's got to be some evaluation of this and any of the missed picks as to where he sort of got clouded and perhaps needs to reevaluate how he goes about his business to be better, which is totally fine and something we all should be doing in our lives in our own little corners.
Look, I'm still hesitant, just speaking very honestly right now, to make grand conclusions off this. It's still very fresh in our minds. There's a process that I go about, Jahns goes about for sure. You've obviously, the honest part about all this is there are pieces of this that are not necessarily new to any of us. Now, there's a lot of new in here too, and certainly the way Tyler put it all together brings a new level to concern to everything. But there's still got to be a due diligence here before we make any grand conclusions off some of this stuff. But there are some. So I kind of want to lean more to just sort of the bits and pieces that are notable to share with the audience on this. And also, I would encourage you, because this is journalism, to support Tyler and go to golongtd.com and subscribe and read it, because he makes a living off working on these pieces for months and months and months and months. But that being said, there was another part going back to last season where after the New England game, there was an internal thought with the coaching staff that we got to create a competition here with Tyson Bagent. Like, it is finally time to tell this. So it's months and months and months of basically giving the quarterback everything he was asking for, from ironically something we were talking about a couple hours ago on our show, which I actually said on that show, which was they got rid of the cadences. Like, that happened. And it's because, according to Ty's piece here, the quarterback asked for that. And the veterans on the team were like, what are we doing here? We need that. And so defenses were just teeing off on them. So they finally get to the point after the New England game where it's embarrassing all across the board. And they decided they were going to have a competition, or at least put some more pressure on Caleb and, stop saying yes to him all the time. And instead, according to this report, again, this is according to this report, the GM came over the top and just, the way I read it, made the decision to fire Shane Waldron and said, we're not going to have a competition. Caleb's still the guy. And it just led to more and more conflict, and Caleb essentially being told yes and yes and yes, until finally Thomas Brown takes over. And this should be surprise nobody based on how last season went and what we heard from Thomas Brown, but he didn't put up with it. And he said it how it was. And he apparently, in a team meeting, encouraged the entire room to start telling the quarterback how it is, which speaks to what we've talked a lot about this offseason, was just them lacking the leadership too. I mean, the reality is like there's breakdowns at every level from the top down, which unfortunately, if I am going to make one grand conclusion, this stuff keeps happening to this organization because of that. It always starts at the top, and it has for a long time. And I am encouraged by the fact that they're trying to make changes, and they are doing that. But evidently, it didn't happen fast enough to save last year, or to save of all the organizations that never should have any type of pre-draft quarterback process go wrong again. It should have been the Chicago Bears after what happened with Mitch Trubisky in 2017. 100%. I mean, the fact that even if like half this stuff, it turns out isn't true, which I'm not even trying to suggest is not, it's still damning that it's being written again. That's the problem here, right? Like, and so I know I just said a lot and kind of went off, but it's there's so much here that's concerning on that level.
Well, and just to underline the points of just like little things that you can look at. Look, last year they had games where it was over in the fourth quarter. You could have put the backup quarterback in there and see how he did, but they didn't do it. They literally didn't let him throw a pass last year. He threw 3 passes because it's protecting Caleb. At least that's what it looks like when you put all of it together. So look, I want to be clear here. None of this means that they can't, that all of this with Ben and Caleb and Ryan and Rob, that doesn't mean, none of this means that it can't work out. But it should mean, at least whatever part of this is spot on accurate, the Bears are willing to acknowledge, that they sit down and have a real discussion about how they can be better. And hopefully it's already happened, by the way. It shouldn't take Tyler Dunne putting out a 2-part, 3-part, however many parts this thing is going to have piece for this to come to light. But there it is just to there's just a lot of lessons that are being taught here. And I think you have to, the focus needs to be on how can we be better going forward as this thing unfolds. And who knows? I mean, maybe Caleb will have a great year. Maybe he won't. But either way, the Bears should deal in reality and not try to protect themselves or the quarterback or anybody, and try to, do what's best for the organization going forward.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to try Tyler one more time. Tyler Dunne, I think he's trying to go voice only with us, which is good because we mainly want to hear what you have to say, Ty. Can you hear us?
I can hear you beautifully. It is, guys. See, you got my bald head in the corner, so I guess you're still stuck with that. But it's definitely an upgrade to just get the voice version versus the visuals.
Yeah, you sound good. I guess we'll start with you on this. I mean, first of all, I can't even imagine how long this took to put together. We were kind of talking about, is this a Ryan Poles piece or Caleb Williams piece? Like, we're still trying to sort all this out. Like, what stood out to you the most about all the reporting you did on this story?
No doubt, and we talked about the Bears, back in March, right? On my pod, I think, and had some mutual enthusiasm around this coach quarterback combination. I actually chatted with Caleb Williams' private quarterbacks coach, and I mean, he called it a perfect storm. But I wanted to go into it with an open mind and try to chat with as many people as possible. The Chicago Bears and this union, I figured would be a huge storyline early in the offseason, and kind of expected the story to go one direction, and it went the other. And it did start there with part one with the coaches. To answer your question, though, I do think it's more of a Ryan Poles story. I think it is about the general manager. And when people kind of dig into part two, we take you inside the draft room, talking to current and mostly former, obviously, Bears sources on what went down. And I was shocked that there was a complete lack of debate, discussion. I was told by multiple people it was Caleb Williams all the way. I mean, as early as December you can really go back to 2022. They would have drafted him if he was draft eligible back then with that first overall pick. So he wasn't the only one who viewed Caleb Williams as the transcendent Midas touch quarterback that's going to save your franchise. Don't get me wrong. But I going into this, I thought there would have been more vibrant debate around Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, the whole group. It's a historic quarterback class potentially. But again and again and again, what I kept hearing was, if you didn't believe Caleb Williams was the quarterback, Caleb Williams was the answer, your opinion was not welcomed inside that draft room.
Tyler, I'm just curious, and I don't know how much you can answer this question, but like the genesis of how this came together, where you started like, oh my God, there's enough breadcrumbs around here that, and you know what, I'm going to go down this road. Can you sort of take us through how this sort of crystallized that, yes, I'm going to do a deep piece on what went wrong, what's happening in Chicago, basically?
Yeah, I think with all of these deeper dives, that's kind of that's definitely the bread and butter. What we try to do at Go Long, go behind that curtain and maybe chat with coaches, scouts, players, administrators, people on the business side, as many people as you possibly can to see how this game really works. I mean, I think that there is an NFL that may be portrayed on social media, press conferences, and then there's the real deal behind the scenes, which it was interesting to hear how cognizant the GM in Chicago is there when it comes to social media. But yes, I think it kind of started with these coaches last season. Like, say what you want, okay? They're pissed. They're pissed off by how they're being portrayed. From Caleb himself, his words. I mean, my reporting kind of started before the Seth Wickersham excerpt report at ESPN came out, and definitely encourage everybody to read his book. Seth is amazing at what he does. But when that kind of came out, people started talking a lot more. And I think there was another report down those lines, maybe a month or two before that was similar, that nobody showed him how to watch film. And it was so at odds with the reality per these coaches that they wanted to express their feelings. So that's kind of how it started. And a lot of these guys are in the NFL. They have jobs. So I get it. I know that anonymous sources can make people feel uncomfortable. Personally, I think that's how you get a lot of truth in pro football. And look, I mean, it's all laid out there. They give vivid detail on how it went down with Caleb Williams as a rookie. And it's pretty damning. And look, I wanted to definitely get Caleb Williams' comments on some of this stuff. Wasn't made available. That's fine. And he's spoken down these lines plenty of times before to you guys out there. So we hear his side of the story. We hear the Bears side of the story. I think these coaches wanted to show not just Bears fans, but everybody across the NFL what they live day in and day out. And it was not pretty.
You also were very clear. I'm sorry. He was also very clear on the piece that you reached out to Matt Eberflus multiple times, and Flus did not respond back. Anyway, sorry, Hoge. I thought that was interesting.
Well, yeah, I just want to. Jahns is here, so I want to bring him into the conversation too on this one. So just so you know, Tyler Jahns is here too. I'm going to ask one more question, and then Jahns, you can jump in. But I'm just so that dynamic, I am not surprised to hear when that accusation that came out that it was like that no one showed him how to watch film. Like, there's got to be two sides of that story. I mean, it's the NFL. They're like, whatever truth there was to that, I'm sure Caleb has a point. But even he did address it after that, and even he downplayed it a little bit. But I'm not surprised to hear that, hey, all these coaches who got fired wanted to defend themselves. That makes sense. So my question to you, Ty, is when you're going through all this and trying to take in the motives of everybody you're talking to for this story, like, how do you digest all that? Because I'm sure you understood too that you put it right there in the story. A lot of people were pissed off when they heard that.
Yeah, and I think that what gives their takes credence are the examples, right? Like definitely they were not shy, and they used language I probably can't even say on this show that people can read in the story. But there are specific examples of course, there's the football side of it, the X and O side of it, the film side of it, on quote unquote babysitting sessions is the way one coach put it to me. They literally sat down with him, showed him how to watch film. There were optional pass protection meetings that he wouldn't show up to. There were lift sessions that he wouldn't show up to. There's all that stuff. But I think what was pretty damning too is just the relationships between Caleb Williams and the coaches. If something went wrong, we all saw the viral video clip. I'm sure you guys are tired of talking about it. People are tired of listening to the net, right? Missing those throws, storming away. I mean, these coaches had flashbacks. They said that's basically what Caleb Williams would do to them. If they said something he didn't like, it was turn around, walk the other direction in a huff. And I think Shane Waldron, he didn't want to really escalate the situation. He's a non-confrontational person, and he definitely appeased to Caleb Williams early. I think there's coaches that didn't like how much he and the offense kind of bent to the rookie's wishes in terms of the snap count, taking checks out, giving him power that maybe he couldn't necessarily handle, all of that. And I think that, Caleb kind of, for the lack of a better term, railroaded him, would walk all over him. And Shane Waldron wouldn't necessarily stand up for himself. You saw it in that New England game, right? And then Thomas Brown comes in those last 5 games, he's a very different coach. He is old school. He is in your face. And I think that he tried to challenge Caleb in ways that Ben Johnson probably is challenging him right now. And with 5 weeks to go in that season, it was too late, right? It was an unsalvageable situation, unwinnable situation, people getting fired all over the place. It wasn't going to work. But maybe if there's a shred of hope here for Caleb Williams, I think a full off season, Ben Johnson, I've talked to a lot of people about Ben. You can get some of that at the end of part 2 as well. This is somebody who is going to shoot it straight. Look, he didn't draft Caleb Williams. He's got his way of doing things. It's going to be, you get on board with what we're about in terms of the offense and handling it, and also being coachable, watching film, doing the work that you didn't do as a rookie. Or I don't think you'd be afraid to move on from him, right? I think Ben Johnson has a lot of power there in Chicago with personnel as well. So that's where it gets interesting. And I think that's where you can be a little hopeful as a Bears fan. This is going to be Caleb Williams' best shot with this coach.
Tyler, you mentioned Thomas Brown, and you had a very vivid anecdote in your story about an interaction that Caleb Williams had with Thomas Brown, I believe after he took over. For those who are watching or listening right now and who haven't read your piece, can you kind of paint a visual or give us a few details about that interaction that they had that you put pretty high up in your story? Can you take us through that?
Sure, Adam. I mean, there were a few, and there are some more scenes later in the story as well. Once he becomes that interim head coach, where he's trying his damnedest to hold the rookie quarterback accountable in ways he wasn't being held accountable before. But yeah, Thursday night, this is fresh off of a really good performance against the Lions, right? I think it would have been after that game in which they had like the worst Friday walkthrough, Saturday sessions of their lives. Like, they were terrified. What in the hell is going to happen out there? And that's kind of what's wild about Caleb Williams is, despite everything, he can still go out there and throw for 300 yards like he did that weekend. 4 days later, slop fest against Seattle. And you know what? before I get to the senior describing the first play of the game, they rehearsed it 3 times the day before. They went over everything, and you can see it on the replay. Caleb Williams is staring at the wristband, gets up to the line of scrimmage, stares again, completely forgets to motion Cole Kmet over. DeAndre Swift just rams into a bunch of Seahawk bodies, and he looks over to Thomas Brown like, what the heck? Later in that game, I'm not sure what the subject was, but Thomas Brown is trying to tell Caleb Williams something, and Caleb isn't having it. He walks away, and coaches can hear this all on the headset, right? So that's how they were able to bring these scenes to life. Thomas Brown hits that mic button, and in so many words says, "Don't effing walk away from me." Just pounce. He's a calm, cool, collected guy for being an old school coach. Lets the expletives fly and gets right on him, and Caleb just keeps walking. He's walking back onto the field. Thomas Brown can't just go out there and, wring his neck, but he was very angry at Caleb for that, justifiably so. I do believe that, I think Caleb Williams apologized later for that, which is good, but that was a scene that played out in training camp, in the exhibition games, in various regular season games. And that one particularly, coaches were shocked that it didn't get leaked. I mean, it was in front of coaches, in front of players. A lot of people saw that.
It plays into, the part of the piece where in the draft leading up to it, they were too afraid to actually make him do the Wonderlic or any other test because they didn't want to anger him. And it also plays into, at least in my mind, to what Ben's doing now, which is saying things like, sounds like it was good protection. Like they're stripping away the protection that was there for him last year. Is that Tyler, was that maybe one of the more damning things that you uncovered in your mind when talking to everyone that you talked to?
You just nailed it. I think that's the theme of part 1, part 2. Roles were reversed, right? The threat was real. We hear it now. Like, he was worried about playing quarterback for the Chicago Bears. This is a century plus of just wretched quarterback play. I don't need to tell your listeners, viewers, anything they don't know. The threat was real that he could pull an Eli Manning, a John Elway, and try to play for somebody else. And this was the apple of Ryan Poles' eye. He fell in love with Caleb Williams a long time ago. He saw Patrick Mahomes in this guy. Like I said, with those scouts, it was get on board or get out. That was the mood. That was the tenor inside of these draft meetings. So when that's the case, yeah, he's on his visit. He doesn't have to do the sort of things that other prospects have to do. Like they didn't ask him to do certain things that might tick him off. And without giving too much away, there were some major red flags that came up through this pre-draft process that frankly just were not discussed at all in draft meetings. Whether it is a potential learning disability that the coaches got into, that scouts got into, that they could see, and it's a difficult needle to thread because they're empathetic for that kind of stuff. And their point is, look, if we knew this, we probably would have coached him in some different ways. And also, by the way, that is not the main problem here. It's, here are 5 other things that we kind of clashed over. So yeah, I think that they were in recruit mode. They weren't interviewing Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams was checking out the Chicago Bears to see if this is a place he wants to play. And that really sifted into the football. OTAs right away, coaches could tell, like, oh, this is different. We're not necessarily coaching this guy because he's not listening to us. They'd be in meetings, guys. They would, an assistant coach would just ask him a question and he just wouldn't say anything. He'd just stare at you like, why are you asking me a question? Well, you're the quarterback. Like, these are things you have to know in this particular game plan. Like, who does what? Very, very strange in a million different ways. And we try to flesh that out over, 27,000 words here.
Is that how many it was? Because I was like, is it really 27,000 words?
Well, we got part 3 coming still. So yeah, when you add it all up, I think it's right around there.
Wow.
So my last question for you, Tyler, in your story, in this, there's a Bagent part of the story, and let me go back to last season. I think it was Mark Silverman of ESPN 1000. I believe he reported this on the air that some veterans were disgruntled and had gone to team leadership about potentially making a change at quarterback, not for, because everyone was pro Bagent, just because things weren't working with Caleb Williams. Later on in our reporting for the Athletic, we reported that these conversations did happen, but there was a concern about Caleb's development under the current coaching staff and how things were kind of playing out. And this was part of our story on the locker room, kind of going after Matt Eberflus. So that was part of that. There was a big Thomas Brown part in that Athletic story as well. But I'm curious, like, when the Tyson Bagent stuff comes up to you, like, how do you interpret that from the coaching staff? Because this current coaching staff has already described him as phenomenal. The current head coach, Ben Johnson, has said we're of the similar mind. The team itself has signed him to a contract extension. I'm just curious how you interpret all the backup quarterback stuff as you gathered it and later produced it in your piece.
You laid it out there as only you can, Adam. I mean, you hit on a lot of the points that these coaches themselves brought up. And I get it. The backup quarterback is always the most popular guy in town. I can remember at Syracuse when I was at the Daily Orange, writing a column that, Ryan Nassib should be the starter over Greg Paulus. And I walked by Paulus at Newhouse and he kind of gave me a dirty look. Like, you learned way back when. That's what the people want. They want the backup. But in this case, it's true. After the Cardinals game, 29-9, just an absolute disaster. After the Patriots game, another absolute disaster. Something needed to change. And Matt Eberflus told his staff, and we got it all in the story. People want to subscribe at golongtee.com. Thanks so much for finding us. He told the coaches that they're going to give Caleb Williams some competition. Now, it wasn't necessarily going to be a 50-50 split of reps. They weren't necessarily going to outright bench him. They were going to give Tyson Bagent some reps, see how Caleb Williams responded, and for once and for all, finally, something they probably should have done in some form or fashion, back to OTAs, back to training camp, hold him accountable. And that was the plan. And this was what was more damning, and you brought it up yourself right there. There were players that wanted Tyson Bagent. Several. At first, I was told, Mercedes Lewis, DJ Moore, it was something that they wanted. And then a coach told me, way more than that. There were several. They wanted Tyson Bagent to be the starting quarterback after that Patriots game. And then what happens the next day, Tuesday morning, Matt Eberflus comes in and says that Shane Waldron, who they were talking about maybe moving to the booth, maybe taking a pay cut, maybe keeping him around. It went from Monday, nobody's getting fired. We might move Shane up to the booth. Tyson Bagent, we're going to get him some work too. Shane Waldron has been fired, and Caleb Williams is the starter. And Ryan Poles, the GM, what I was told is the one who kiboshed it, said, no, this is our undisputed, unambiguous starter. For better or worse, we're not turning back. So, but it was real. That was very real. And that was, previous staff. I think that what you're reading there between the lines with Ben Johnson says a lot. Like, I think that they like the fact that maybe there's a little pressure on Caleb Williams. He's going to be held accountable in ways from day one. He wasn't from day one last year. And Tyson Bagent looking damn good in practice plays into all of that. I'm not going to say, hey, Caleb's going to be benched week 4, but keep an eye on how he plays, because this staff, like the last staff, they love Tyson Bagent.
My last one for you. You got one, Hoge? Go ahead.
Well, it just has to do with Ben Johnson, unless spinning it forward, unless you got something else from last year. No, it's just, I guess, so despite everything we're learning here, there's still a season that starts Monday, and Ben Johnson is here now, and this coaching staff is, we've seen it with our own eyes. I mean, him being really hard on Caleb in training camp practices in front of everybody. So there is evidence that this is a much different situation if Caleb Williams is willing to, continue to take that coaching, as he evidently has. Albeit, as we're learning from this story, we don't see everything or hear everything behind closed doors, even if bits and pieces do leak out. What is your outlook after reporting on this entire story? As you mentioned at the top, you and I had a conversation back in the spring about how things were looking rosy. Is this salvageable in your mind? Because Ryan Poles is still here too, with all the stuff that you reported in here. Right.
Look, I think it's good to zoom out to an extent and say, all right, Josh Allen completed 52% of his passes as a rookie. I live here in Western New York. A lot of people weren't happy with Josh Allen then. Nobody knew where that career was going, even into year 2 when they were winning some games. Patrick Mahomes, I think, played 62 snaps as a rookie. Joe Burrow went 2-7-1 and then tore his ACL as a rookie. It can turn around, right? It can turn around. But it's up to Caleb Williams. And that's what, to a man, all of these coaches, even scouts, and even GMs around the NFL. I talked to 5 other NFL GMs for this series. They all say it's up to him. The guy's unbelievably talented. Like even the coaches who were skewering him say the talent is undeniable. But you're not playing San Jose State every week. You can't just be Houdini and juke and spin and zig and zag and run away from that DN who's running a 4.9 in the 40 and has a beer gut. Like, it's different in the NFL. All 11 on the other side of the ball. I mean, they will sack you in that scenario. So you got to put in the work, right? You got to lead. You got to be a good teammate. There's so much more to the quarterback position. And there's a GM that kind of broke down all of his interviews with all of these quarterback prospects from 23 to 24. And it just stood out to him how Caleb was different in all the wrong reasons. You've got to do something more. You can't just rely on your talent at this level. So Ben Johnson, to his credit, is doing everything in his power to get Caleb Williams to that spot. Maybe he gets there. I don't know. I'm not sure. All I can say is up to this point, football's been easy for him, to use the words of coaches and scouts. And now it's not easy for him. And it's up for him to have a counter and fight back.
Hey, Tyler, last one real quick for me. You talked about how Ryan gives people attention that are above him that he'll stop for, whereas he's a little bit in his phone with people that he doesn't necessarily need to speak to. I'm curious, do you have any intel on how much of the Caleb thing was maybe even coming from above Ryan? Was there a Kevin Warren factor to this, or a George McKay? Anything above where like he just knew that that's what the organization wanted?
Ryan Poles loved Caleb Williams, from the moment he set eyes on him, is what I was told repeatedly. He was the driving force behind this, if anything. And, we'll explore this as well in the future. Like, I think it's interesting with ownership. You've got Jerry Jones, right? Who's the owner, the VP, the GM, the water boy, the, ticket man. He does everything. He wants his hands over everything. When he gave up power to Bill Parcells and they won games with Quincy Carter, it pissed him off. He said, I will never let that happen again. I'd rather lose and have control than win and give that football power to somebody else. You've got that kind of owner on one end of the spectrum. And then you've got George McCaskey on that other end of the spectrum where, he says he's a fan. He takes a step back. And that sounds great in theory, but there's got to be a middle ground, right? There's got to be some type of happy medium where, as an owner, you say, look, I know you love Patrick Mahomes, or you love Caleb Williams. You think he's Patrick Mahomes. Let's at least dig into one of these other quarterbacks just as much, right? Like, prove to me that I'm crazy. And I don't really think he said anything down those lines. It was do your thing. And I think as an owner, he may grow to regret that, because as we get into Jaden Daniels right now, it looks like the Bears might have missed out on an all-time great, and they never were really interested in him at all.
My last one is just from like the editorial process. Like, I've worked on behind-the-scenes stories before. I know there are layers to this and people you answered to. Like, how much was left on the cutting room floor per se? Is like, because I've had this. I remember doing a story on Matt Nagy and how things kind of unrolled there a bit. And I got a former player like talking to me, doesn't want his name on it, but he was immensely inflammatory. Like, whoa. Like, there's too much there. So I'm curious for you, like, how much was left out from the actual pieces you're putting this together?
Right. Try to get into as much as we possibly can. And there's a lot in there, for sure, and trying to, bring Bears fans, all NFL fans, places where they don't otherwise get to see. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of damning details when it comes to everybody, from the owner to the president to the GM to the quarterback. It's right. You don't write something like this with this kind of conviction through the lens of all these people, unless you maybe know a little bit more that isn't in print. And I don't. How do you fix this thing? Whew. I think the Bears are looking at this. Okay, you get the $13 million man, Ben Johnson. He's been the top coaching candidate the last 2 years. He really could fix this whole thing. Like, that is a real thing. And if he does, everybody looks smart, right? Like, Poles look smart for drafting Caleb Williams. Kevin Warren looks smart. He'll get that stadium done eventually. Like, this thing could end in a good place, but so much stuff that they do is just not normal. That it's like a Jenga. You take out a few blocks, eventually the whole thing's going to come tumbling down. And that's where I guess I would think this thing's going. Like, to not even incorporate your coaches on some major problems when it comes to a quarterback you want to take first overall. I had several GMs around the NFL tell me, like, wow, that is not normal. Here's what we would have done in that situation. So I'm not optimistic, but Ben Johnson he saw some miracles work there in Detroit. He's just described as this coach is going to live in the lab. I mean, he will be locking his office and figuring out every possible way to make this work. So there's a chance through him. And you do have a talented quarterback. It all comes down to the work ethic. Is Caleb Williams willing to work in ways that he didn't last year? And only he can answer that question.
He's at Ty Dunne on Twitter, golongtd.com. It's been going strong since 2020. Long form pieces like this one. We still got part 3 coming. So what's the sneak peek on that, Tyler?
Kind of looking at the entire operation there. Like, what are the atmospheric conditions that allow this kind of stuff to happen where, you don't really have a draft process. It's quote unquote rigged is how one scout described it. Like, what's that world really like, even beyond the football. And so, yeah, talk to a lot of different sources through all the different departments at ALLCITY.
Tyler, hope you get your power back. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks a lot for hanging with me, fellas. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks,
All right.
Tyler.
Tyler Dunne from golongtd.com. Yeah, if you're just joining us, his power went out shortly after dropping this story, which is terrible timing. So he did what he could to join us. We appreciate him jumping on the phone.
Many Bears fans say that's the karma that you get for putting something like this out there 3 days before the season starts. Damn it, Tyler.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of listeners and readers, I'm sure. Like, even I heard this on ESPN 1000 was the callers calling in. Like, how do you process stories like this when you want the quarterback to work out and you want things to be successful? I think, like, the best advice that I would give it as someone who's written stories like this about previous regimes, from the Matt Eberflus firing to the demise of Matt Nagy here, is, like, sometimes this is it. It's not always pretty. It's not always press conferences and news conferences and things you hear in certain settings. So take it however you want to take it. But I think there's a lot in this report to chew on. And Tyler's been around for like a long time in the NFL world. He was a writer at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He was one of the national writers for USA Today, I want to say 10 years ago, as they expanded their coverage. So he's been at this for quite a long time. I know he used to cover the Packers, but he's actually based in Buffalo. So he's got those connections up there, and as they tentacle out throughout the league. So Tyler's been, as you said, Adam, he's been running this website since 2020. And there was actually, I want to say, the Athletic media podcast did a feature on him because he's been good with it. And he goes to all the owners' meetings. He's at the combine. He's always working behind the scenes.
Look, I would, along the lines of Bears fans that are freaking out. I see some of them in our Discord that are, upset at the story and whatever. Look, sometimes you gotta go glass half full. Let's break down the glass half full real quick. No one is saying that Caleb isn't talented. Not a single person is saying that. All right. No, everyone is saying that he needs more accountability, and the Bears are giving it to him. The coach is at the podium talking about how that sounds like good coverage. He has been open about how he needs to be better. He is giving him the accountability that he probably hasn't had anywhere in his entire life. The Bears have set this up. So you got a talented quarterback getting accountability with a better roster. And hopefully, what I'm trying to underline is that the organization will look at what they did and not do the same things going forward. If you're going to take the report, then, and I don't see any reason why you wouldn't, of what Tyler's putting out there. This doesn't mean that it's over. Now, it also doesn't mean it's going to work out either, obviously, but there is action here to try and make it go in the right direction. So, look, you can freak out if you want, but you could also see it from hey, you got a talented guy who's finally getting what he needs with a much better coaching staff and a better roster. So who the hell knows what happens? The guy could throw for 400 yards on Monday night. Nobody knows.
I think the best way to look at this is through the lens of how Ben Johnson is coaching him, like right now. He is coaching him extremely hard. Caleb Williams is on the record saying that he wants this. And I think we're all learning, or we're going to learn, just how much he wants this level of intensely detailed coaching, because Ben Johnson, as I think we've all learned, is relentless with all this. And not only is he relentless with all this, Press Taylor is, Declan Doyle is, JT Barrett is. They're all of the same mind here in pushing Caleb to be as great as he can be. Like, I had long conversations today, not long conversations, but multiple conversations today with the assistant coaches about working on Caleb's cadence and how that needs to get better. That's professional quarterback play. So this is how, like, the Bears are literally, they've tore him down. Now they're building him back up under Ben Johnson, and they're trying to push him in ways that I don't think we can all agree, whether you hated that staff before or whether you want to, make excuses for this, that, or the other. Like, this coaching staff, this current coaching staff under Ben Johnson is coaching him harder than he's probably ever been coached before. And they're going to push him as much as he can take the pushing. So this is going to be interesting to watch. I think that's the best way to look at this, is how Ben Johnson is going to take this to the next level, how much he's going to push him going forward here with the Bears.
And the Bajan part that you brought up, Johnsy, look, they wouldn't have signed into an extension if they didn't think the dude can play. So, look, for everything they said and everything they've done, they think they've got a solid fallback plan. So, I know people want to hear that either, but that dude set records. He's shown that he can play. He's shown he's got the offense. It's a hell of a backup plan they have going on right now. So, I get that it's not the piece that you want to see right now, but I would go glass half full and I'll almost be excited about what's going on over there.
All right, I'm just going to close with a moment of honesty, just so people understand. This is not what we want to see right now either. Like, nobody,
of course,
this idea, and I'm seeing it, in the comments, and I probably shouldn't even address it, but like this doing this show doesn't help us at all. So I just want to get that out there.
It's like zero.
Probably the exact opposite.
Yeah,
exactly. That's why I want to get this.
You should be thanking us, damn it.
No, I mean, I'm being serious. Like, this idea that stuff like this, like, we do it for clickbait, and it's you don't understand the business at all. What would help us is if the Bears went to the Super Bowl. That would help us. Jahns and I talk about this all the time. The fact that Hoge and Jahns has been so successful with one winning season that entire time is a miracle. It honestly is. I mean, there's no reason that show should still exist. So imagine if the Bears could actually be good. That would help everything. Like, no one wants to be sitting here 3 days before the season talking about this. And a hilarious bit of irony, we pre-recorded Hoge and Jahns this morning. While I was sitting there reading this story from Tyler Dunne, I was thinking about how airing on Hoge and Jahns at the exact same time was us talking about an over and under on how many times we'd be talking about the Seth Wickersham story the rest of the season. And we both said 0. That did not age well. that aged horribly. So it aged so bad that the first time it aired, it was already wrong. Like, we don't want to be doing that. And I hope that they come out and, Caleb on Monday night puts, quiets everybody with 400 yards and they beat the Vikings. And that would be great. And I'm going to I'm going to think about this positively too, and think like, and this is why I asked that question to Tyler in that interview. I mean, the reality is there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he's being coached the exact opposite of what's in this story. What's in that story is extremely alarming. It's extremely alarming for a different day for us to probably have a deeper discussion about the GM's part in all of that and whether or not, which hasn't come up in the show yet, he deserved that extension this offseason, quite frankly. If all of that's true, there's some major questions that need to be answered there. But, okay, we also learned in that story exactly what Caleb needs. And everything we've seen and heard since Ben Johnson got here in January, that's what he's getting now. So I still think it supports the same idea that has been consistent this entire offseason, which is this is on Caleb now. You're getting what you wanted. You're getting what you need, clearly. And how does he run with it? Because all that nonsense in that story is over now. At least we hope. Is that all fair?
Yes.
Yes. Well, you hope they're past it. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd like to give myself credit for not looking at the comments the entire show until the last 3 seconds that I peeked at and then quickly got away from them, because God knows I don't know. Jesus. I appreciate the passion of all of you. I just can't. There's certain times where I just, woof.
Yep. All right. Johnsy, thanks for jumping on. Thanks for getting Tyler on the show. I don't know. I need to cleanse myself with some high school football. I think right now is what I need.
If anybody wants to talk about
great
this
cure of high school football,
if anybody wants to talk about this further, I'll be at Western Illinois tonight with nothing to do. So if
so you're going to a high school football game too?
Yeah, easy.
Oh,
you will take that back. Go Cats. But I'll be hanging out if anybody wants to. Just yell at me from the old end zone. I'll come over.
You might get it according to the chats here.
Yeah. Just hit me up, you Discorders. If you're out there, we'll go personal meeting.
For those complaining about us doing this show and wanting to ignore this, hey, I got great news for you. We had a really good show earlier today that you can listen to. And Jahns and I had a full preview on the Minnesota Vikings game without any talk of this at all, because it was recorded this morning. So don't miss any of that. Please hit like, please hit the subscribe button. Take a deep breath.
So I think some of you have to hit the resubscribe button.
Oh boy. All right. The Bears need to win Monday. That's my last comment. The Bears need to win.
They do. And it'll go away.
Winning does cure all.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you on Monday on the pregame show if you're still around. Goodbye.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.